All right, hi everyone. The sky has fallen. Catastrophes have happened. The most wanted list 1.2 is finally upon us, and um, joining me today to discuss this are three other people, very notable players from the UK Netrunner scene. So let's introduce them. We have um, Tris. Hi, Tris.
Hi Ben, how's it going?
Doing well, yeah. You are one of the few people who are currently undefeated against me, 100% win rate. So you must be a pretty good player yourself.
I've heard that rumor. Most people seem to suggest that I'm kind of a scrub. I like playing account Siphon Wizard, and that makes me a bad person for some reason.
Nah, don't worry. We all love playing Account Siphon Wizard. We're on it. Speaking of Account Siphon Wizard, another person who loves to play is none other than Dave Hoyland's disciple. It's Mark Mottram. Hi, Mark.
Hey Ben, how's it going?
Yeah, doing good. And yeah, finally we have UK Steam Hack League runner up. It's Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi Ben. I've personally never played Account Siphon or Wizard in my life, so I have no idea what these guys are talking about.
But since it's the most wanted list, you can talk to us all you want about Professor, which I'm sure you've
Yes! Yes! That's my jam.
Yes, so today, what I hope to offer everyone who is watching is a bunch of different perspectives on the most wanted list. So hope you enjoy. But first, before we get into it, in one word, what do you think of the most wanted list, Tris?
I'm actually excited, I think would be the word that I pick. It's really refreshing, and it's definitely shaken up the meta. I mean, you just see all the activity on JNet on the moment. It's really, really cool.
Wow, awesome. Mark, yourself?
I think Boggs has single-handedly fixed Netrunner, so fixed is the word that I would go with.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to agree with you. Fix the game badly needed a fix, and we got it. Sam?
I was going to go with necessary.
Nice.
Nice.
Yes, I can't imagine what regional season would be like without this.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so thankfully, we have the most wanted list with us, and we are going to discuss the card by card breakdown in a moment. Other podcasts have done it too, so probably won't be able to offer too much new insight, or will we? We'll just have to find out. But first, something we want to talk about is to look back at the past most wanted list. So before yesterday, we had two most wanted lists so far, and I guess it's worth looking at what the goal of these most wanted lists are, and if the previous most wanted lists have accomplished them. So, yeah. Does anyone have thoughts on the older most wanted lists, and what do you all think these lists have done to the game or have not done to the game?
So if I could offer a perspective from someone who used to play the Game of Thrones card game, this was version 1 before the reboot. They had a restricted list and a ban list, but very few cards were on the ban list. The restricted list basically meant you could only play a full set of one card that was on the restricted list and then no other cards from the restricted list. Now, the point was to try and break up the combos that existed in the game. So two cards that combo together in kind of unexpected ways would go on the restricted list to ensure that you couldn't play both. Now, it wasn't a ban list, but it was quite blanket in how it approached things. And I think the most wanted list is a vast improvement on that system. Cards don't really combo together in Netrunner in the same way that they do in Game of Thrones. And I think the most wanted list kind of reflects that in that it stops you from playing lots and lots of cards that kind of synergize too well together. Wildside and Faust being two prominent examples of that, but it doesn't prevent you from doing it. It just forces you to make difficult choices.
Yeah, I'd massively agree with what Sam said, and I don't know if you guys have had opportunity to listen to another potentially rival Southern Hemisphere podcast in which Boggs has actually appeared to discuss the most wanted list, and he makes a really good point where he was talking when he got put in this situation. Considering ban lists, restricted lists, and all this sort of thing before. In fact, he mentioned on a couple of occasions where he'd actually listened to the playtesters and said, like, look, Cifr, Faust, these things are a problem, but they don't go on ban lists, they don't go on restricted lists, because that obviously is a fault within the game design. And if you're going to go kind of that route, then you're basically admitting that this card shouldn't have been printed. But in doing this as a tier 3 and tier 1 thing, you get the opportunity to, if you really want to play that card, you can do, but you take the influence hit for it, and you suffer in the rest of your deck as a result. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to achieve. I think overall, every time there's been a most wanted list been introduced thus far, it's kind of taken the meta, which has usually become quite stagnant, and there's usually at the top tables very much kind of a lot of the same deck. In the first instance, it was Fast Advance and Prepaid K. In this one, it's basically become a litany of Anarch and combo decks, and they've kind of moved on as a result. And each one, I think, thus far has always been successful, and I'm very optimistic about this one.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And just to just to make it clear, the more Netrunner content out there, the better. If those of you who are not aware, the Winning Agenda, which is one of the premier podcasts for this game, actually did a podcast with Mr. Box himself on the latest Most Wanted list. So do check that out if you haven't yet. Mark, you mentioned about the tiered system, and that's something we'll go to right now. So with this Most Wanted list, we have the tier 1 and the tier 3 and the new tier 3, which cards within this tier will add 3 influence to your deck for each card included. So Sam, I guess this is something new, and I'd like to hear what you think about the new tiered system as opposed to some other way of executing it, such like a ban list or restricted list. What do you think?
So I think for certain cards, the 3 influence is fine. A good example might be Faust. If you're gonna run Faust at this point, you're almost committing yourself to running a mono red deck, and we've seen that those can actually be okay. And Faust is an example where you might take that card and then just try and run with it and just build into it as much as possible without taking too much from outside factions. I don't think it works so well for a card like Rumor Mill. The reason being is that Rumor Mill actually wasn't that much in evidence because the very existence of it was keeping things like Glacier, like unique upgrades down. And so you'd probably maybe see 1 copy, 2 copies in people's decks at most. No one was running a full complement of 3. And yet now by putting 3 influence on it, it's effectively banned the card. I don't see this card being played at all. So I think it actually affects different cards in different ways, putting a 3 influence hit to your deck.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we can see from the past Most Wanted list is that cards like programs, for example, like Cerberus Lady, these cards can still be played post Most Wanted list because you just include 1 or 2 copies in your deck and you can consistently get them with SMC, for example. Whereas with cards like Prepaid Voice Pad, which you have to invest all 3 influence in because you want all 3 copies of, it takes a much harder hit. So as you said, the Most Wanted list inherently affects different cards differently. Tris, what do you think of the tiered system?
So I quite like it, and I agree with Sam that you do have different impacts for different cards. Realistically, the only card I'm sad to see at 3 influence, though caveat this, I do understand why. Tony say I'm looking at you, is DDoS. DDoS to me is a card that does seem like there is interplay that the core player can have in order to try and mitigate the effects of it. And I think putting it at 3 influence, particularly when you've got so many other tasty options in Anarch, you've got Cifr at 3 influence that you need to consider ahead of DDoS. You've got Faust at 3 influence that you need to consider ahead of DDoS. To me, it just seems like that ends up meaning that card never gets played, and it becomes the Prepaid Voice Pad or the lady of our upcoming meta. And that's quite sad because I think it is an interesting card, and I do like its effect a lot.
Yeah, I have to wonder about the inclusion of DDoS on this list as well. Like when you look at the other 4 cards that are on it, and you can see how oppressive they are. That's Blackmail, Faust, Rumor Mill, and Cifr. DDoS just doesn't seem to fit so much, and I have to wonder if maybe the existence of Diaper or the DDoS False Echo combo is probably what pushed them to include it that high on the list. It's hard to say for sure.
I would tend to agree with that. And if I was going to solve Diaper as a problem, I'd have taken a different route, which would be make Hyperdriver a unique card. So I would say what Boggs has done, or he's kind of taken to looking at, is basically saying, well, are these cards an interactive? And from that degree, preventing the opposition from doing something is a really powerful effect, but it is limited to the most outside piece of ice, right? And if you do that and you put 2 pieces of ice down, that massively negates the power effect of something, and that is within your control to do so. And if you're looking at other stuff and you say, right, well, if they combine that with 1 hyperdrive a turn, or they combine that and use it for an apocalypse or whatever, then there's still a decision there that needs to be made. And the fact that you can double ice your remotes or double ice your centrals to prevent that sort of thing. There is an action and a reaction from when they're doing that. Like if they're putting DDoS down, it's very unlikely that it's going to come as a surprise to you when they start using it. And there is a kind of limit effect to that, because it is just for the rest of the turn. If you're kind of installing it, using it straight away, you've got 3 runs. And if you're concerned you're playing that kind of oppressive Anarch deck, you kind of double ice your centrals. Like classic thing that I find all the time is that people double ice HQ against me when I'm playing Wizard, because they expect I'm playing Cifr and DDoS. And like that's a way of getting around it, right? And yes, it provides that early game pressure, and I think maybe it could be an influence. But if it's gone on there for a 3, then there is a kind of question mark with that. The other aspect to it that I kind of wonder why it's been put on is its combo with N% is the only other thing that I can possibly think of.
Yeah, I don't think we were seeing the N% combo with DDoS much. You were seeing it a lot with Blackmail, but...
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think most of it comes down to, can the corp counterplay, has the corp any counterplay with it? Not in terms of slotting in hate cards like Eliza's Toy Box or as such, but more of during the game, can you double ice your remote? You know, that's something most corps can do.
I love how rather than kind of executive boot camp, your head went to Eliza's Toy Box. You've been playing much HB recently.
I try, Mark. I try. Yeah, very good point, everyone. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that warrants a lot of the cards on the 3 influence tier for me. And you all are quite right that DDoS is a bit of the odd one out, because it arguably shouldn't be there. I do agree with that. And something that we just touched on, DDoS has kind of a similar function to Blackmail. They are both seen as oppressive, because it basically says the corp cannot do this. In this case, it refers to Rezzing Ice, which is a very fundamental action. So
and Rumor Mill is actually similar in that respect.
I have another point to raise as to why this is inconsistent. So if you think about cards that have similar effects, so there's a new Shaper card, I forget the name of it, that's in Terminal Directive, where you play it and you basically pick a piece of ice and you make a run, and they can't res the ice during that run. And also, as well as Inside Job, we now have Spearfishing, which is coming out in Terminal Directive, which largely, if you think about it, is you're avoiding a piece of ice, has a very similar effect to it. And yet you have this card, and yeah, it's a slightly upgraded version because it's for the rest of the turn rather than just one specific piece of ice. But it's still a kind of similar effect for that, and to kind of put it at a 3 most wanted list, universal influence as it's now called, is quite significant when you look at those cards which are normally part of the game.
Yeah, one of the interesting things in listening to the Winning Agendas discussion was Michael Boggs saying that some of the consideration, at least, for why they put DDoS in the MWL was that it hits rush decks quite hard. And this is a major problem for decks like Wayland, for instance, that we don't see a lot of in the meta, largely because their strategies aren't particularly robust to a lot of the top runner cards at the moment.
I would say that one of the reasons Wayland isn't good is DDoS is way down on that list. But
yeah, no, sure, no doubt. I mean, in the list of things that are wrong with Wayland, there is a lot more pressing stuff to fix. But the more important thing that I wanted to pick up on was the idea that rush decks are uniquely harmed by DDoS. One of the things that we've seen a lot of in the last 6 months, and that people have particularly complained about, has been these kinds of sideways decks that attempt to try and throw out a bunch of assets and run very minimal ice. DDoS is a really good counter to a lot of the corp strategy that just sticks a single piece of ice on 3 centrals and then attempts to try and use their assets or their ID power to protect their assets.
I mean, I describe that as bad rush play anyway. I mean, yeah, if you look at any I think every faction has an answer to someone doing that. If you look at Kit, they're able to assume it's a code gate and break it anyway as soon as they've got a code gate, break it down. And you've got criminals that have got spear phishing an inside job, right? So if you're trying to score behind a single ice remote, like that's a risk no matter what faction you're playing.
No, this is more a case of you use single pieces of ice to lock down your centrals. I'm looking specifically at decks like the NEH Acid Spam, the so-called Joey backs archetypes that use turtle backs to attempt to just try and build an oppressive board state. And typically they'll try and keep you out with a single wraparound, for instance, on HQ, or a single little engine on R&D. DDoS is one of the best ways to mitigate against that kind of strategy and to force them to actually try and invest resources in finding ice and then playing that ice down on the board. And that does give you a little bit of chance to counterplay against decks like that, which can be quite oppressive. And is one of the deck archetypes that people have complained a lot about that we've seen in the last 6 months, and has forced everyone to try and play Wizard in order to counter it.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting take on DDoS. It would be interesting to see a meta where DDoS is not a tier 3 most wanted list. So yeah, we'll and see whether it actually has an impact on the viability of rush decks. But I think one of the biggest reasons for DDoS to be on the tier 3 list, besides the diaper interaction, is actually as Mr. Box actually said during the Winning Agenda podcast, is the interaction with account siphon. The turn 1, the ability to just DDoS siphon turn 1 is such a huge tempo swing in the game, and there's a fairly small chance, but non-negligible, a fairly small chance that the runner starts with that combo, and if they do, as the corp, you just get battered unless you double ice HQ, and that really warps corp gameplay, and I think that's actually one of the biggest reasons to put DDoS on the most wanted list.
Switching gears slightly, I think that's the same reason that Sensie Actors Union has gone on, because just getting that turn 1 made such a difference against certain decks that, similar to having DDoS and account siphon in your opening hand, it just warps the gameplay, and games can just be decided by whether or not a corp happens to open with Sensie Actors Union and the runner doesn't trash it.
Yeah, very fair observation. So I guess that's one of the key tenets of the most wanted list, is to look at cards and say, well, these few cards can provide such a huge swing early on if you draw them. Like they, whether you draw them on turn 1 or not drastically affects the outcome of the game, and it leaves the game outcomes more vulnerable to chance. But yeah, we can talk about that a bit more when we get to Sensie Union. But for now, now that we've covered DDoS, let's talk about the similar card, which is Blackmail. What's so different about Blackmail compared to DDoS? A lot more people say that Blackmail should be on the most wanted list, and there's good reason for it. Anyone want to explain?
Yeah, so I think the reason that Blackmail goes on is because okay, sure, bad publicity removal cards do exist, but they're mostly bad, and they require you usually to spend some influence on them. For instance, Elizabeth Mills is one of the better ones, but you still have to spend the 2 influence on her and then have a way of finding her.
I should interject here and mention that it was specifically designed that every faction has a bad pub removal option in faction. Now, whether that's their in-faction removal option is actually good is a separate matter altogether, but every faction actually does have...
they all have one, but I'm just thinking of the ones that actually can be impactful. And
the only 2 that see play are Clone Retirement and occasionally Lizzie Mills. You don't see any of the others.
Yeah, Rex Campaign is pretty naff. And I think the reason... So they added these cards in because most of them do something... even if they're not removing the bad publicity. Elizabeth Mills can be used to trash things. Clone Retirement is a 2-1 agenda, and so on. But as I say, you still have to find those cards. You still have to play them, and if you don't, then say if someone's playing Valencia and they have that bad publicity to start, you are limited in terms of the options that you can do as a corp. You can't, you know that you can't score agendas until you get rid of that bad publicity, because any remote you try and build is instantly denied by a single Blackmail. So then you have to look at other options, which might include things like Caprice and Ash and stuff. But then obviously cards like Rumor Mill exist to deny that as well. So yeah, Blackmail was just too oppressive.
Yeah, it basically got to a state where you could no longer play that archetype, because if you came up against a Valencia deck that was playing Rumour Mill and Blackmail, which likely every single deck was, if you were playing that Glacier build that required on defensive upgrades, you basically had no plan. Like, the ice never got rezzed. If you did try to rush out, they got the remotes from there, and you tried to use a defensive upgrade, they didn't work because Rumour Mill turned them off. So it basically just made that archetype unplayable, which is why the asset spams and the combo decks became everywhere.
Now, Mark, some viewers out there might ask, how is that any different from other silver bullets? For example, you have to include Plascrete in your deck if you want to stand a chance against a well-built meat damage deck, for example. So yeah, what's so different? Can't all Glacier decks just splash for 1 or 2 copies of mills?
You would think so, maybe, but when you're looking at like the archetypes that are strong, so you've got probably Polana and Food Coats and RP are the ones that maintain them. The influence in those are still quite tight, and you've got to fit in a lot of things. So in HB, you're probably looking at including Ash and Caprice, and a couple of Caprice of that, which probably feed in that. From that, and we were, until this most wanted list came out, you were looking at spending even more influence on getting the best ice that was incredibly taxing and doing that. But I think if you also look at the stuff that combos with that and the stuff that was in faction with medium, is that very much a case of, yeah, you need to be able to find those pieces. They're usually going to be 1 of or 2 of, because there's a lot of influence that needs to be spent to include those good counters in your deck. And by the time that you found them, like Glacier as an archetype, right, doesn't have a particularly good level of draw or tutoring that's associated with it, because that's not what you're trying to build. You've got that steady build slot of things, and you score agendas as they come out. And especially with Blackmail, Medium, and Rumour Mill, you kind of find that you've lost the game before you've even got anywhere near the sort of boards that you do, and you have no active defense of being able to do anything with them.
I think that's the key, is that the runner who's playing Blackmail and Rumour Mill can just draw until they get those cards. A Corp can never really do that, because a Corp is always having to worry about what they're doing with their agendas. They can't just keep drawing cards until they get to their counter.
In addition, if you've thrown Rumour Mill onto the table, it means that their main source of draw in a lot of decks, Jackson, and your main ability to get rid of agendas that you don't want clogging up your hand, also becomes completely useless.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the 3 main Glacier archetypes, RP and Polana I'll probably put together, but their draw cards in that consist of maybe Agriplex, but usually Jackson. And in HB Food Coats, it is Jackson. That's it. The rest of your things are Breakaway Grids and campaigns and a lot of ice. There is no inherent draw in that, and the idea is that you're able to protect, and as you're seeing agendas, you either try and score them or cycle them back with Jackson, and then eventually you get in a position where you score. But if they sit there and just go, okay, well, if you try and rush, I'm just going to play Rumour Mill and Blackmail out. If not, I'm just going to put 2 mediums down and just play 3 Blackmails, and I'll probably win by that point anyway. It's just not, you can't do anything about it. That archetype just doesn't work in terms of 49 cards and 15 influence.
Yeah, I think the 6 magic words that we heard right there is you can't do anything about it. The very differentiating factor between cards like Blackmail and Rumour Mill that we keep going back to is the fact that there's just no Corp counterplay if you don't draw your silver bullet, or if your deck doesn't contain the hate card in the first place. You just can't win. And given that, another important thing to note is that these being runner events, we are looking at Rumour Mill and Blackmail. The runner has much easier access to these cards, both with more powerful draw engines, and more importantly, the ability to recur them. Looking at the Anarch faction, you have Deja Vu, same old thing. That potentially allows you to play Blackmail or Rumour Mill up to 9 times, and that is not something that the Corp can cope with. And if these cards are actively suppressing the win condition of a Corp, that's it. The Corp just can't win, and that doesn't lead to very fun games because the Corp doesn't even have a fighting chance. So yeah, that's pretty much Blackmail. Anything anyone wants to add for Rumour Mill, which is actually quite similar in terms of oppressing the Corp as Blackmail?
So I made this point a while back when I think like a month or so after it came out, but when Clot first came out, there was a big discussion around whether or not it was going to affect Fast Advance, to the point where people wouldn't play Fast Advance because of the threat of Clot. and then Clop would get played by good players because they knew that fast advance wouldn't be in evidence. And turned out that wasn't really true. And actually what developed was this really interesting meta where you did have people playing fast advance and they had counters to Clot, and that you were sort of playing around those. And it actually made for quite interesting games. Rumour Mill was exactly that. What people worried about with Clot was that it suppressed fast advance, and good players didn't need to play decks that had Rumour Mill in. They were playing for the decks that they knew were going to be in evidence, things like Wizard and so on, to deal with asset spam that kind of filled up the meta, filling the vacuum that Glacier left behind. And Glacier was just completely suppressed by the fact that Rumour Mill even existed. And I think that's a bad state of affairs if the game gets to that point where you don't even need to play a card for its presence to be felt.
I think the integral point of why Rumour Mill is such a I very rarely would say it's a bad card, but I think the reason why, because you can go, well, it's a current, you can turn it off, you can score an agenda, you can play your own current, that sort of thing. But if you look at Corpse and Runners, runners have a lot more recursion and can actually just sit there and just keep playing that and keep bringing back the Rumour Mill, and it's not affecting their gameplay or the board state. Whereas with the Corp, like the fact that you're spending your turns getting that, trying to score that agenda, you're either leaving yourself vulnerable in other ways, or you're playing a current, which you're having to recur back using cards that means that agendas are building up in your hand, and you're basically focusing on that. Basically just means that the runner can sit there and do it for a lot longer than you can. It's similar when you're sort of playing against CI and you'll just keep recurring employee strike, and obviously CI is probably better focused on being able to do that, but CI is not in a position where it can kind of do that forever, even though it's very much focused on getting stuff out of archives and in the bin. And that is why it's such a kind of oppressive fundamental card. Again, there's very little that you can do about it. If that's what someone's going to do, they're just going to keep playing Rumour Mill and saying, well, you can't score out in the way that you want to do, and I'm just going to win unless you can do something about it, which you can't. So
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, there is a very inherent asymmetry in Corp and Runner currents, and the power level of Rumour Mill certainly wasn't designed with that in mind, also it seems. Tris, I'd like to hear. Another reason why people don't like Rumour Mill is that it just seems like poor design, not thematically wise. Everyone loves Princess Space Kitten, but in terms of just outright blanking cards that are unique, that are non-regions, what do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, so one thing I do wish to say in defense of Rumour Mill, and I think it's something that has been noted in other sources, is that it really changed the way in which people use Jackson, and I think changed it for the better. It meant that you got a lot more preemptive popping of Jackson because people were scared of Rumour Mill coming down and then having, to lose the 6, 8, 14 points in some cases that they stashed in archives that they couldn't get back. I do think that's a really valuable addition to the game. I used to play lots and lots of games when I first started where people would just have Jackson Howard sitting behind tons and tons of ice that I just couldn't get into, and it just felt like I never had a foot in the game because effectively they had a constant Sensie that they could use to draw up, find the pieces that they wanted, and discard everything that they didn't want until such time as I could get into archives or get into the server to trash Jackson. That being said, it would be much better design if Rumour Mill had worked in a similar way to targeted marketing, for instance, where it was a single card that you had to name as the runner, and that the Corp would then have that card blanked rather than all defensive upgrades, all unique cards, universally blanked.
I would tend to agree with that. I would say there's a couple of things now that things. Firstly, Jackson's cycling, so hopefully that problem will go away. But secondly, there's still answers to that sort of play now.
Councilman.
Anyway, and the fact
Councilman and Pollop.
Councilman, Pollop, unregistered Smith and Weston, which everyone seems to forget. And yeah, there's just a little bit more fluidity with it now, because for most of those, like you either have to play them or you have to make a successful run on HQ before there is that kind of interaction of being able to play it. And there is just that kind of what Boggs is obviously trying to promote is the game has very much become a kind of your side, my side, solitaire type thing, whereas this is a kind of more your move than my move kind of thing as a result of it.
Can I just ask how many people here have, when playing Jinteki or in real life, installed a Jackson, rezzed him, tried to draw 2 cards, and then realised that there's a rumour mill in play?
That happened to me, I think, the week it came out, and then I learned my lesson.
I still do it all the time, and I'm so
Really?
glad that rumour mill is not going to be as much in evidence, because I'm so embarrassed every time it happens.
Yeah, there's always that awkward moment where like there's that pause, and then someone writes, "Oh, JNet must be broken," and you have to point out to them that rumor mill is in effect.
Yeah.
Where's my?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
Yeah, that's quite hilarious. Although I guess it's a matter of which card do you have to be aware of. It used to be rumor mill. Now everyone has to be aware of pull-up. I'm sure many people will be playing it now.
Or interdiction.
Interdiction is going to be a thing, yo.
For
So
sure.
going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I just had someone account siphon me because of interdiction. I'm well aware that it is a thing.
Yeah. So people are gonna play these silver bullets. They're slightly less powerful than rumor mill, as in they are not, play and get it done and over with. But you actually have to play them at opportune times. So for core upgrades and assets like Jackson Howard that we mentioned, but also for upgrades like Caprice and Ash. What does everyone think? Well, what do y'all think about Caprice and Ash's power level now that rumor mill is a +3 on +3 influence?
Caprice definitely comes back into the meta a lot, right? I mean, certainly I've just been popping on occasionally during the day just to see. I've spent the day working, but I got bored and distracted by all the talk of the new most wanted list. And it seems like the sort of major Glacier archetypes, the RPs, the Polanas, the HBs, those have come back in a big way. And it's great to see the competitive lobby filled with games. I mean, this hasn't been the case for months and months and months. But it does look like people are really excited to be able to play with Caprice and Batty and Ash again.
Yeah, that's
And
why
I
we're
think-
seeing a lot of those upgrades being played right now. With the Kitty gone, the mice come out to play. Do you all think it's going to be super strong, like very dominant in the meta, or will the counter cards like Interdiction and Pollock keep it down?
The counter cards exist, and I'm sure that a balance will be reached. I think it will probably be a slightly more varied meta, at least until things settle down and people start to figure out what really works with these cards. Kind of pseudo-banned, Blackmail and Rumor Mill in particular, maybe Faust, maybe Cifra. So, yeah, we're going to see more of them, but I don't necessarily think that they're the only game in town.
I think it's also people getting a chance to play with them before rotation takes a lot of those fun toys away. I mean, we've spoken about rotation as this sort of vague notion for the last couple of months, but it's getting nearer.
4 months? 4 months away?
Yeah, 4 months away. So it's we've got what another couple of we got another cycle, I think, terminal directive that drops in X number of weeks. So I mean, the meta I think will enjoy playing with the toys for a while, and it'll give them a nice send off. But I don't think they're going to become too oppressive in the meta we're going into.
I think the recursion or the revitalization focusing towards this Glacier archetype is not entirely rumor mill. I think the whole effect of Dumblefork's archetype being massively nerfed now, Cipher going away, kind of means that the big ice is kind of comes back on to a degree. And I think people actually quite enjoying playing that type of deck again. And I think that, as Sam has already said, the answers are out there, and there are a lot of options for them. If you're playing things like Ash and Caprice and Batty and things, you've got Interdiction, you've got Polyp, you've got Unregistered Smith & Wesson, you've got Vamp, you've got other cards as well. You've got counter.
I think Vamp is so overlooked against Caprice.
Yeah.
It's always been such a good counter.
And I think that's a good place to be in. I've been playing a lot of games in this Most Wanted 3 meta in testing, and I think that I'm always in my happy place when I'm playing against Dave. It comes down to skill or tricks or making nice plays rather than just the inevitability of grinding out a game knowing that you're going to lose because there's nothing you can do about it. And the games that we've been playing recently have been that, where one of us has done something cool or taken an unexpected line of play, or one of us has made a mistake, and that's decided the outcome. It's not because one's playing this deck and you're basically playing runner and you're going to win, and you basically try and win as many corp games as you can. When there's that kind of skill level that's in there and the games are being decided by that, then that means that Netrunner's back in an exciting place for me.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the objective of the most wanted list ultimately. You want to create an environment where both the runner and corp feel like the games are thrilling, that they have meaningful choices to make, and that everything is skill. Yeah, like decisions are skill testing rather than, did I draw my silver bullet, or did I include it in the first place, or what matchups do I get, who do I get paired against in the Swiss rounds. I think you brought out a very good point there, Mark, about the Glacier archetype resurging, not solely because Rumor Mill is gone, but because of a combination of factors.
I dropped out there for a sec, sorry guys.
Yep, no problem. So cards like Rumor Mill negate upgrades, but cards like Cifr, which was recently printed, negate ice essentially when combined with Parasite. So Tris, what do you think of Cifr and its place in the tier 3 most wanted list?
So people who know me and who know that I've enjoyed playing sort of a very oppressive Cifr and Anarch deck over the last little while will maybe be a bit shocked to hear that I'm actually really excited to see Cifr disappearing. My absolute favorite faction since I started playing Netrunner about a year ago was Big Ice HB. And given the existence of Cifr, it was just virtually impossible to play that deck. You're given all sorts of really exciting tools in the form of Fairchild 3, in the form of the big Fairchild, massive improvement over Wotan. But these were just options that you could never play with. You were forced into trying to play with cheap, piddly little ice, or ice that couldn't be destroyed. Architect, Lotus Field, Magnet being the sort of 3 that you most commonly slotted into that deck.
Now you know why I mentioned Eliza's toy box, right? Got a off the matter there. But yeah, go on, Tris.
Yeah, but it meant that you didn't feel like you were playing the kind of classic Netrunner that I think all of us, even me starting quite late on, were brought up playing with. The game that I was taught was all about the corporation building these big servers and having ice with lots of subroutines, and was scary, and the runner needed to have tools on the table. And the Cifr method just meant that you could face check anything with impunity. I mean, I used to be able to run in an account siphon people with 2 credits because I could rely on being able to lower the strength of virtually anything and then either eat my way through 1 or 2 subroutines, take the other to the face if necessary. It just made it far too easy to play degenerate strategies, and it pushed out, I think, a lot of the fun aspect of Netrunner. So I'm really excited to see it basically as if it's going to exist, it's going to exist as a one-off, and that makes it really inconsistent to use. Almost likely, I think it just gets pushed out of the meta in a big way in favor of other more exciting Anarch consoles.
Yeah,
honestly, I don't even know why Cifr was printed. Like you can justify what some of the cards that came out it kind of early on in Netrunner's history, because they didn't really know what people were going to be playing, what strategies were going to become dominant. But by the time Cifr was printed, everybody knew that Parasite Recursion was really strong. Why make a card that just completely blows that strategy into the stratosphere? It didn't make sense to me.
I have to agree with that point, Sam. Why put Clone Chip and Parasite on the most wanted list and then create a card that basically focuses on all of their strengths? And I don't understand. And give it 2 extra memory units and only cost it at 5. It's just baffling.
Yeah.
Now I've talked to some people who are probably not as much in the competitive, not really tuned into the competitive scene. They have been playing their janky decks and trying to make their own deck work. And some of them are actually quite upset about the loss of Cifr, because it does actually help to make certain strategies a lot easier. Like one very good example is the static the so-called snow volley breakers that came out this cycle, your Nefer, your Sunya, those breakers that start at 1 strength and gain in
Null
strength.
breakers.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
those basically.
you play Null and Data Sucker. That still works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I played for a random ID tournament. I was given Reina Roja, and I decided to build some janky monstrosity that used Hernando Cortez and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And the one thing I did find there was playing Cipher with the Conspiracy Breakers without Parasite actually, I think, was a little bit more fair than maybe it's a sort of Parasite recursion has been with Cipher. Largely because it made a breaker like Black Orchestra finally playable. I mean, it was still monstrously expensive to get through most things, but being able to save 3 credits a turn on a breaker that's horribly inefficient was really fine. I really didn't think that was such a bad idea.
You traitor! Lynch him! No, I'm just joking. If anything,
consider it this way, then: if the way in which Cipher had been printed said what Damon suggests it should have said, that it only works on the first piece of ice you encounter each turn, would it have been that oppressive? Would it have been that bad? And I really don't think the answer is yes. Certainly it's not as oppressive in its current form as the heyday of Dumblefork, where you could, cutlery your way through an entire server, clone chipping out David left, right, and center, and using parasites and data suckers to immediately destroy an entire server. But it is bad that you could select the piece of ice that you wanted to destroy. And I think if you didn't have that choice, I really don't think Cipher would have been that terrible.
The problem with it comes from the disparity of where you're sat there as a corporation and you go, right, well, I've got a Fairchild 3 here, which is a humongous piece of ice and it's a 6 credit investment. And for them to just go, I'll cipher it and then install this parasite off the street peddler, and it essentially costs them 1 credit. And that piece of ice you've invested in is just completely gone away. It's just a significant disparity there, and that's a kind of swing between the corporation and the runner that should only really occur like once in a game. And the fact that could occur every run is just insane.
Yes.
Sure, but it seems to me that the problem there is Parasite rather than the console.
This is my thing. I feel like Parasite is the problem, not Cipher. I don't see why Parasite's not 3 influence and Cipher is 1. Or in fact, Cipher probably wouldn't even need.
Yeah, it's a point of then what do you do with the cutlery thing, because you can still destructize that way. And although cutlery can be getting expensive if you're using Eater to cipher certain pieces of ice that are annoying, like itchy and things like that, then it becomes less of a problem.
Yeah, and I also think that the nice balance about the cutlery is that you need to include the right kinds of cutlery. So you need to have the right option at the right time. And I used to find when I was playing sort of bad Dumblefork that I would often be in situations where I just wouldn't have the right piece of cutlery. And that problem is completely negated because all I need now is a parasite or a deja vu or a street peddler. And realistically, I'm going to draw into it at some point.
Yeah, I also think, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, that Cipher probably hurts Wayland more than any other card really that's come out printed recently.
Yeah,
but
sure.
You think what they're really strong at is their big, high cost, high strength barriers and other pieces of ice, and then just to be able to just ignore that. It's like when you res a curtain wall for 14 credits and it just costs them 3 with paperclip. It's just, I imagine it's soul destroying, but
yeah, I remember. I remember
it is.
Yeah, I mean, I remember just before Quorum was released, there was a resurgence of Blue Sun decks that were sort of playing off the idea of using mid-seasons and Boom and Oversight AI to try and fuel their economy. And those decks just completely disappeared from the meta once Cipher was released because, you can Oversight your curtain wall, but if I can just get through it for, 2.5 credits and, then how does that deck work?
Yeah.
And
Cipher
people know
basically blanks Blue Sun as a playable identity in a competitive meta.
People know that I played lots of Blue Sun even when it was considered unpopular, even through like the dark days of employee strike. And I was the first person to say when Cipher came out that Blue Sun is dead. And I hated saying that because I love it. It's one of my favorite identities. But Cipher killed Blue Sun. And I'm really glad that this might mean that Blue Sun comes back.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, when Quorum came out, I looked at the co-op side. I was like, "Whew, we are finally getting a nice big barrier, Chiyashi. 4 net damage, looks so good." And then you have Cipher in the same pack. Honestly, I can't wait to try out Chiashi now that Cipher is going to be a lot less prevalent.
It's disgusting, Ben. I will straight up tell you now, it is the most horrific piece of ice to run into.
I will play my low stack and emergency shut down the heck out of your Chiashi every time from now on. Alright, but we've been rambling on a lot, and we are still not done with the tier 3 cards. We still have Faust. This one's a bit interesting. Is Faust broken, game breaking without counterplay, like the rest of the cards that we have mentioned so far? Any takers?
Controversial opinion. I really like Faust, and I think that it being at 3 influence is probably incorrect. Hear me out on this. The Anarch faction, particularly post-rotation, is about to lose its biggest source of economy in liberated accounts. Realistically, that means that Anarchs are relying now on maybe splashing for something like account Cipher, maybe spending a huge chunk of their influence on 10-mission contract. Either way, I think the Anarch economy is quite weak at the moment. Certainly, this is notwithstanding the potential for cards in the rest of the Red Sand cycle to come and fix this problem, but certainly as of right now, the economy is quite fragile. I liked the idea of being able to use cards as a substitute resource for credits. And I think part of what made the Faust engine such a disgusting one was that you could pair it up with Wildside and adjusted chronotype. And that meant that you could just cycle through billions of cards far too quickly. I think when I played decks and played against decks that didn't rely on the Wild Cakes engine, Faust became a lot fairer as a breaker because it meant that you could kill yourself, you could break yourself to try and get into a server for one turn, but then needed to spend time recovering from that turn. And I don't view that as meaningfully any different from having a runner that credits up for a turn, makes their big run or makes their 4 runs in the next turn, and then spends another turn recovering. I think it's completely acceptable to have cards as a form of currency in the game. They just need to make sure that that is balanced, so it's not too easy to draw cards. And I think Wildside Chronotype is the big culprit there, rather than Faust being too powerful.
And it was also the combination with David that meant that Faust could deal with the low strength stuff, David could deal with the high strength stuff, and Wildside would give you the cards, and then that was it. You needed those 3 cards in play, maybe an adjusted chronotype, so you had a few more clicks, and some cutlery to actually make sure you had to never deal with the ice again. And that was basically the Anarch rig for a long, long time. So I think the Faust being placed at 1 was probably sufficient to make those choices slightly more difficult. I probably agree with Tris that 3 is too much. It doesn't feel like it belongs in the same tier as Blackmail, Rumour Mill, and Cifra. And now that those cards are on there, I don't see Faust being so much of an issue, because those cards could kind of compound the issue that Faust presented. I don't know. I feel like
those are very good arguments that you all have brought up.
So Boggs actually raised a good point in the Winning Agenda podcast, where he said that Faust is the only one that's on there where he considered putting it in at 2, which I think is interesting. I actually think that the points that you've made are really, really good in terms of the ice destruction that kind of goes away somewhat, and the draw engine is an issue. I also think that the resurgence of defensive upgrades helps, right? Because I view the use of Faust as being similar to stealth, that you can usually get in once, and that's fine. But the fact that you may have to run multiple times to go in and trash Ash and then run again, or to go in and win the side game and clear out that server, or the fact that you have to go in and win a side game eventually, kind of puts that back in a harsher place.
Yeah, and
for the limit that's being used around it. So I think that that is the one that I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of drops down to a 2 or a 1. The one thing that I do think that is an issue with it is just the fact that Anarchs in themselves have, like, always what I describe as a they don't have any in-faction tutoring, right? So you're always at a whim as to when the right breakers do eventually appear in your deck. Whereas if you basically run 3 copies of Faust, you can go, well, I've got that, and then I can just fill the rest of my deck with these cards. And at the end of the day, I don't care if I'm running multiples off, because I've got my 1 breaker, and that pretty much does the job with everything, if you include David as well. I think that having that is a little bit of a power creep for Anarch, because it is AI breakers as opposed to be specifically limited in certain way or some certain faction, and being able to do that and have basically access to absolutely everything is a problem.
Yeah.
Sure, but I do think then the flip side of that is you don't have the in-faction tutor. So it means that often as an Anarch, particularly having played Regwiz for a little bit of the store championship season, the number of times people rushed out behind a quandary that I just couldn't get through because I just could not find a breaker. I mean, it happened far too frequently. That's why I eventually abandoned it. And maybe this is just because I'm not a particularly good player of the Reg Anarch build, but it did feel incredibly frustrating. And I think Faust does solve that problem in an acceptable way. I think you're right that the downside of Faust is virtually non-existent. I mean, burning cards that you've put duplicates of in your deck that you don't really care about losing, particularly if you're now using conspiracy breakers that you can throw into the bin and then tutor out immediately, is maybe a little bit of a problem. But I think
having that in faction and Anarch has always been sort of a risk-reward strategy, right? Like they've got really good draw cards, so they've got things like Inject, they have got Wildside. They've even got Frantic Coding now, which isn't the worst thing in the world, although it does come with a significantly massive downside. And there are other to give that example of that quandary, you can parasite that. You can use cutlery and break it with a different type of, like for Eater, for example, or there's just lots of different ways that you can get around it, and like that's kind of what you do. But the thing is, for having that, if you take away Faust, you basically need to say, right, I'm playing Anarch, I need to spend a significant block of my cards focusing on draw because I need to find these breakers. I need to find my answers really quickly, and kind of just putting that in and saying, well, I'm playing multiple Wildside, therefore, as soon as I get that down, I will find my Faust and I will find all my answers before the Corp can do anything about it.
Sure.
And that's it. That's a significant problem.
Yeah,
I'm just really...
sorry. Yeah, those are a lot of good reasons why Faust is considered very powerful, and a good reason why it should be on the most wanted list at least 2 influence. But we've been looking at this mostly from the runner side. One argument that a lot of people bring up when talking about the power level of Faust is how it just completely suppresses rush type strategies, like as you mentioned, the quandary. You can't really build a deck that around cheap gear check binary ice like supermodernism in the past because Faust just completely wrecks it. What do you all think?
Maybe. I mean,
I've always disagreed with that slightly, because if your opening turn is play Faust, then try and get through whatever that piece of ice is. If they had something like Sea Source and Scorch in hand, that's it. You're done. So supermodernism can still exist, and because they were still having to trade cards, which is health, to steal agendas, and then supermodernism can turn that into victory. So I never considered that to really be the problem. It was more the fact that Faust in combination with cutlery just meant that every single piece of ice was always temporary, and that you only needed 1 card to get through anything and 2 cards to delete a piece of ice forever. To me, that was always far more oppressive than the supermodernism rush negation, which I think there were other issues with that deck that Faust wasn't the biggest issue there.
It's also worth noting that we've got a lot of anti-AI ice recently. Things like IP block, Chiashi, whatever that terrible Wayland one is that also gives you 2 credits if they've got an installed AI. We had Swordsman for a long time. I mean, I think Faust becomes a lot less effective in a meta where you've got each faction being given options that deal with AI breakers. And the argument is then, that the power level of those anti-AI options is probably different for different factions, and that's maybe something that needs to be addressed with upcoming cards. But I really don't think Faust negates rush strategies when, for a single influence, you can import a single IP block, and that then becomes 3 cards for Faust to burn through, and they have to take a tag and clear the tag all on turn 1. And as Sam said, with Seesaw Scorch in hand, that's the end of the game, basically, for them.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I have a lot to say about anti-AI ice. I think now that Faust is on the most wanted list, I think AIs will become, a lot less playable, with these anti-AI ice being so impactful. But we'll save that.
What about Mammon?
Sorry?
What about Mammon?
Oh my gosh, man. That we'll see how
Get
quickly it
rich.
goes on the most haunted list.
Get rich, break subroutines.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, spoiler
Can I
alert
just
for
say, before we
anyone
move on from Faust, Professor guys, Professor and Faust, still a thing.
Professor Faust David is a
That's
thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nah.
Pity you can only have one clone chip now, but whatever.
It's cool. That's all you need.
The shape way. One SMC, one clone chip, and you're good to go.
Yes. Shout out to all professor lovers out there. I'm sure you want to make professor.
I think he's just here, aren't you, Sam?
Yeah, that's me. I'm here.
We've got
There's a guy in my meta, Finbar. Finbar, if you're listening to this, you know what I'm talking about, right? Faust and Professor? Yeah.
I hope you gave the wink and point as well.
All right. We'll talk about our last remaining card on the tier 3 list, that's Sensie Actors Union. Earlier we said that this gives the corp a bit too much power early on. When you draw it turn 1 or turn 2, the runner almost always can't really contest it. But surely giving them 1 or 2 Sensie fires isn't the end of the world, or is it?
Yes, it is.
It is. So
It really is,
when
man.
we were at Worlds, I met the American Laurie Poulter, who was more enthusiastic about spreadsheets than Laurie is, and he came out with the statistic and the data to back it up that for every turn that a corp has a Sensie Actors Union rest, their win rate percentage goes up 6.25%.
Okay, so
I'm not surprised.
where did he get these numbers from? As a data analyst by trade, this has piqued my interest.
I think it was through lots of Jinteki games, but
God,
yeah,
that is amazing.
yeah.
Look, people who know me know that I hate this card. When CTM was all the rage, people were complaining about cards like Breaking News, Mumbad Virtual Tour, exchange of information along with GFI, and I was saying no, those aren't the problem. The problem is that those cards are always being drawn in conjunction because Sensie Actors Union gives them A, the draw power, and B, the filtering to make all of those things happen. If you didn't get your GFIs, if you didn't get your breaking news, if you didn't get your exchange of information or your hard-hitting news or whatever, all in together so that you can actually combo them, then it's not a problem. Sensie's Actors Union is a combo enabler. People who complain about combo decks, Sensie's Actors Union is the worst one for it. So I'm glad it's gone.
I also think it's worth pointing out that Sensie fits into a lot of other decks that people commonly say are negative play experiences. We saw it a lot in IG decks, in Gagarin Prison, in the RP Prison decks, and it helps them draw into pieces as well. IG can then discard the cards that's overdrawn with Sensie. RP gets more things that it can throw down onto the table, more encryption protocols, more bioethics. It's a really, really powerful draw card, and the downside of having it be uniced, I think, is massively mitigated by the fact that there are a lot of good IDs that protect assets that you put down on the table by either making them prohibitively expensive or difficult to trash, a la Sensie, a la IG, or that protect it in other ways. Gagarin threatens to hard-hitting use you because you go broke trying to clear out all the servers because you have to pay in every time you want to access. So yeah, I'm quite happy to see Sensie at tier 3, and I think realistically, this is one of those cards that ends up being effectively banned rather than just we see one of, because it's not effective as a one of.
It's the full hand filtering as well, right? The fact that
Yeah,
you
sure.
see those 3 cards and you can pick any card from doing that. And it's like, well, it's only 2 credits to trash, but like you said, Tris, like early game when you're playing against CTM, and you shouldn't be significantly punished for like not seeing any of your economy cards, because you go, well, if they res a Sensie Actors Union, you go, well, I have to go and trash that. And it's like, well, I've then got to trace 4 and I'm avoiding a tag. And then, oh no, I'm not on 8 credits, therefore he's going to hard hit news me. And it's just like, it puts you in a position where you can very much circumstance, unless you get optimal draw, you lose the game, or you're basically forced to play Wizard. And it's the additional kind of thing from that. It's like, oh, well, if you even look past that and the things like the Joey back decks and things like that, it's just the fact that, yeah, you spend the 2 credits to trash it, but they're going to get it back with team sponsorship. They're going to get it back with friends in high places and things like that as well. So it's just the cumulative effect of the clicks and the credits that it's taking to actually just trash that. And like you said, as soon as you get one of them doing that, you basically find all your one-off combo cards, like your exchange of information, your hard-hitting news, etc., and put on all the agendas that you don't want stealing, that you don't want in your hand, right to the bottom of the deck where the runner's never going to find them.
So the underlying point here is that it is quite oppressive and problematic in tandem with defensive capabilities like your encryption protocol, your hostile infrastructure, your friends, because it will just stay on the board. It's very resistant to trashing, and the runners essentially forced to trash it, otherwise they essentially lose the game. Now, of course, this is it takes 2 hands to clap. You can either ban Sensie, or you can ban the cards that are causing Sensie to stay. Your friends, your hostile infrastructure, or in the case of Worlds 2016, which I believe was one of the major push factors in getting Sensie on the most wanted list. What do you all think of putting Sensie on the most wanted list as opposed to cards like CTM, hard hitting news, or friends?
Yeah, I'm not really sure why Friends doesn't go on the most wanted list. I mean, that card is just
we can talk about
ridiculously
friends.
undercosted.
Yeah, we can
but
talk
I
about
mean,
friends
Thank you.
later. But what about defensive
Why
cards?
is Friends not on that list?
I mean, I go back to my point. I think it's the combination, right? It's several cards working in tandem that make things like Sensie Actors Union work. It's the fact that you draw certain pieces in your hand that enable you to keep the runner down, or it's drawing 3 assets that you can then install, which you can overwhelm the runner with. You could put a bunch of those strong cards on the most wanted list, but everyone knows that it's Sensie's Actors Union that's enabling that strategy, so it's a lot easier just to put that one card on. And the thing is, it's not like you're really getting rid of much, because draw cards still exist and they're cheap. Anonymous Tip is 1 influence, I believe.
Special Reports is also was 1 credit to play, and
and it's still filtering.
Same sort of filtering. Yeah.
There's also this really good card called Jackson Howard that does something similar.
Yeah, the rumors tell me that's quite good.
Daily Business Show used to be considered a must-trash card, and then Sensie's Actors Union came out, and people were like, well, that's cost 4 to trash. I mean, Sensie's Actors Union is only 2, so why would I bother trashing that?
Yeah.
So I think DBS might see a resurgence with Sensie's Actors Union.
Maybe. I mean, certainly I've been one of the few corp decks that I've managed to tinker around with in the new most wanted list this morning, really, really early, was a Sensie-less CTM, and it's not good.
Did you try Net Analytics, which is what I'm?
It is one of the considerations I have. That version I haven't tried, and I think could be quite fun and quite interesting. But the biggest problem is just, as Sam said, it's that filtered draw that allows you to draw into your singleton combo pieces that actually makes that deck tick. I mean, anyone who's ever played CTM against a deck that's got Sulset Slums and slums away all your Sensies knows just how much more difficult that game becomes to win, because you can no longer hide your agenda to the bottom. You can no longer draw into the pieces that you need to get rid of the slums, or to, EOI, breaking news into EOI. It's the deck's effectiveness drops substantially with the loss of Sensie, and I think that's probably for the best.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are still not very convinced, because when you look at Sensie Actors Union in isolation, it's cheap to trash, you can't defend it, and it has a powerful effect, sure, but it's high risk, I mean, not high risk, but it's a huge liability, and because it's so easy to trash. But I think if you consider it in the wider context of the entire card pool, with a lot of enabling effects, and the fact that Sensie enables the defensive cards because you draw more of them. I mean, you draw into your hard-hitting news quicker, you draw into more, friends and stuff. This is what is causing the problem, and, while putting Sensie on the most wanted list won't end asset spam once and for all, at least it stops a good chunk of it. It makes strategies like CTM and your asset spam strategies a lot less good.
And I think it's particularly important to put it on at 3 influence as opposed to 1. This is one of the cards where I do think the costing is entirely appropriate for the effect that it's got. Because at 1 influence, it's actually possible to build the CTM deck that cuts the GFIs for 3 restructured data pools, or indeed cuts your commercial bankers for 3 copies of Sensie, and probably is just as oppressive as it was before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
one final point I like to bring out on this about this card is that with Sensie Actors Union in the card pool at 0 influence, as it used to be, a lot of runners were forced into checking face down remotes, and that is just one, not only a negative player experience because checking every single remote just to find the Sensie isn't very fun. But yeah, more importantly, that's the power level of Sensie. Not only does it draw the cards, it also forces clicks from the runner because the runner simply cannot afford to let a Sensie fire. So
I think Sensie Actors Union was one of the main things keeping Shaper down. I have to be honest. Criminals get rewarded for runs because they have Desperado. Anarchs can probably operate at a lower economy than either of the other factions. Shaper just had no answer to Sensie's Actors Union. Every good Shaper deck was running Temujin because it just needed that early injection of cash to start dealing with asset spam, and Sensie's Actors Union was enabling it. So I think Sensie's Actors Union going on the most wanted lists will help, along with other changes, to make Shaper a more viable faction, which is good for me because I love Shaper.
Woo! Okay, while we're on the topic of political assets, I want to turn to Mark, who has a lot of experience playing with IG49, Gentleman's IG, some call it. Your best friend, Bioethics Association, is also on the list. Not on tier 3. It's now a new tier 1 item. We are starting to get to the tier 1s here. So Mark, what do you feel about this addition to the most wanted list?
Have we lost Mark?
I'm back. Sorry, I keep dropping out. Was there a question directed at me? Sorry.
Indeed, there was.
He was saying that your best friend was on the list, and I was thinking Dave Williams is not on the list. What's he talking about?
I thought Account Siphon had gone on the list. I just missed it.
Are you talking Bioethics is my favorite card, and I'm really sad that it's on the list. Yeah, but I agree that it probably should be on the list.
Explain, because I'm not so sure I agree. But go on. Why do you think it should be on the list?
So it was. I think it's a twofold reason. Firstly, there's the implications and the negative reputation it got out of the prison decks, which it was involved with, and the kind of reasons that come along with it in the same way that Sensie Actors Union does. Is that I think if you look at it in terms of forcing the runner to do something early game, then that's not what I describe as being particularly fair. If you get yourself in a position as a corporation where you're forcing the runner to do something, that's usually as a result of you falling behind in the game for a number of reasons. It's usually quite a late game thing. Whereas if you're kind of doing that and making them do something that they don't really want to do, like, as you said, checking every single remote early game, and putting themselves in the possibility of getting hard-hitting news or seesaw scores or whatever it is, then that doesn't seem particularly fair in terms of game mechanic and going into the solitaire side of things. Doing that in that sort of kill deck is really, it's a really powerful effect, right? Because you leave it there, and if they don't go and check it, then they're going to get a net damage, and it may be the case that they've got a card that they really want in their hand, and they're basically afraid of that. There's also the secondary effect of it comboing with other things such as Ronin and hostile infrastructure, and just the continuation effects of it doing it. And it's just a really, really powerful card.
Or indeed just Psychic Field. I mean, a lot of the games that I lose with Prison IG is I check a Psychic Field and then I have to decide either to draw up or go and kill the Bioethics, and either option ends up basically spelling my death.
Yeah.
So can I offer an alternative point of view to Bioethics?
Yeah, cool.
My take on it was that maybe the reason it's on, as Mark suggested, is it's an image thing. Bioethics has become associated with some of the worst aspects of the game. People really don't like playing against IG if they don't have experience against it. And it kind of sends a message that we're stamping down on these kinds of decks. I think Mumbad City Hall is another one where it's more about demonstrating that we're stamping down on oppressive decks.
I don't agree with that.
I definitely don't agree with that. But
we'll come to Mumbad City Hall. Bioethics, for me, I don't feel like a single net damage impacts the game so much that it the runner is forced to having to go and trash it. If they're running something like slums, which if asset spam is popular, slums becomes kind of a counter to that, then rezzing bioethics actually becomes a negative, because if you're only firing it off once, next turn it's going to be trashed. Things like your hostile infrastructures aren't going to fire because it gets slummed. I just feel like bioethics wasn't impactful enough to justify it going on the most wanted list. Based on what Mark said, I maybe can see why it has, but my initial take on it was that it's an overreaction.
I would count this as a fringe case, and I accept that I may be incredibly biased in this case because Bioethics is probably one of my favourite cards in the game. And the reason I think it's so good is for that kind of Jinteki shell game experience where, just in the same way that Ronin became such a good thing for Jinteki and PE, as it then was, is that why would you ever run an advanced card in a remote when you're playing against Jinteki? There was no reason for you to do that until Ronin became a thing. Just in the same way as why would you ever run an unadvanced card against Jinteki until Bioethics became a thing? Because if you've got three or four unres remotes there, and you're playing against Jinteki, you're thinking, right, I've only got 3 cards, or I've only got 4 cards, and if he reses 3 Bioethics, then I'm pretty much done for in that regard. And I think that is a massive uplift for an archetype which is close to my heart. That's been quite weak for a long period of time. But like you said, I think it's that negative connotation early game, and the fact that it became abused to a degree to be a top tier deck that I played for most of last year's competitive season and had a really high win percentage with.
It's also really interesting. I mean, back home, the South African meta kind of had a gentleman's agreement not to play IG, largely because it was perceived as being this really, really horrible, oppressive, negative play experience. So the very first time I played IG was actually the first store champs I played here after coming to the UK. And I played it as a Cifr and Anarch and was like, this deck is rubbish. I don't understand what everyone keeps moaning about. It's terrible. Subsequently, having played it as other types of runners, particularly as criminal, it really is a really, really horrid deck to play against if you get behind. And
I would like to point out that I would never play Prison RP. I played Gentleman's IG, which is pretty much the same thing. Just Dave and I gave it a better reputation. But
if you say so, that helps you sleep at night.
It does. Also, most people when I played it seems from that, and I've had to play against Prison RP in tournaments and beaten it. But it is a complete horrific experience to do so, but you are able to do it and get through it. However, like you said, that reputational thing is a massive issue, and it may be something that's reviewed and comes off the list. But I would say that archetype has gone away now as a problem because of slums, because of the employee strike type things.
I think also
because Aaron is a massive thing for that deck, and also
Museum becoming unique as well. I think made it much less effective because you couldn't then play the 54 one that allowed you to recur all 3 bioethics just over and over again.
Gentleman's IG doesn't work anyway now.
Yeah, sure.
As well.
Sure.
But Aaron's the main problem.
Yeah, very interesting discussion there. I personally really like bioethics as a new win condition for the corp, because for the longest time, net damage was just a very subpar archetype with very few enabler cards that help flatline compared to meat damage, where Scorched Earth is just so much more powerful, dealing so much more net damage. That said,
but Ben, what do you think, for instance, of synth DNA modification compared to bioethics? Something that's maybe a little bit more interactive than bioethics was.
I don't know whether it's more interactive. So here's the thing. This is just a really gnarly issue, and we can really go on all day talking about this. But the biggest issue with assets like these is asset spam. What you ideally want are assets that need to be protected. You want to encourage people to ice their assets, and yeah, rather than just spamming lots and lots of cards on the table. One of them is a more positive player experience. You can choose to contest the remote and try to remove the asset that is winning the game. Whereas with asset spam, you're like, I'm trying to keep up with the corp. My economy is grinding down. My clicks are being worn out, and it just feels a lot more negative. And that's the negative perception that comes with asset spam. and we want to avoid that. How do we do that? We can put all the powerful assets on the most wanted list, like we're doing with Bioethics, which I think is one way to do it. But that just restricts your design space of assets, right? You can't print powerful assets. Then you're left with crappy ones like synth DNA modification, which no one is going to play. On the other hand, you can restrict the defensive cards like your hostile infrastructure, your I don't know, Gagarin, CTM that's making all these, and friends that's making all these assets stick. I don't know. It's a very gnarly problem, and I don't really know how to solve it.
I mean, those cards have their own counter, right? Because each one of those cards you've listed, CTM, hostile infrastructure, and friends, is all countered by slums. And well, not so much the first two, but if you really want to keep the assets down, you can also run Archives interface. These cards exist. It's not like runners don't have an answer to.
Yeah, it did become a point though, like at our store champ in Cheltenham, Sam, where I think people were playing Archives interface and 3 slums, and it comes to the point where that's happening. You're going, right, well, what's the point in me even building a runner deck at the moment? Because I'm basically my first 10 cards are chosen for me, which are probably my flex slots.
But it's not just that your first 10 cards are chosen, it's your faction and your ID is chosen for you as well. I mean, what unites all those cards? They're all orange. So
it's just very complicated, right? Because what you do also is you force every runner to be wizard, to play slums, and if you're not playing wizard, you're playing some sort of anarch with Archives interface. It doesn't exactly make for a very healthy runner meta, even though there are answers to it, as you said. I don't know. But let's not get into this conversation. We can do a separate episode if we want. For now, let's talk more about asset spam, because we haven't spammed enough about asset spam, so I'll spam you more with Mumbad City Hall. So the thing about Mumbad City Hall is that I think it really should have been on Most Wanted List 2, which was the previous iteration. It simply wasn't there, I believe, because of Damon's 6-month guideline. It just barely missed the cut there. But now that we are well past 6 months, it's now rightfully here, and I think rightfully so, because it's too efficient at what it does. With one click, you can install a card that you can draw and install a particular card you want. So tutor, draw, install, all in one click. That sounds really, really good. Anyone has objections to Mumbad City Hall being on the Most Wanted list?
I don't necessarily have an objection to it, but I mean, my feeling is that it wasn't, especially towards the time when this Most Wanted list came out, say since store championships end of 2016, beginning of 2017, I never saw this card. I think the fact that Mumbad Temple's on the list, I think the fact that Museum of History is now unique, and the fact that it's a Wayland card was enough to really make it questionable as to whether or not it was worth an include in most assets.
Did you never play against Hot Tub, Sam?
I played against it once or twice, and I agree that it was a really strong card in that, but I don't necessarily think that it was the biggest problem with the asset spam list.
It also it was used in that. It was also used in IG to really quickly set up the prison list. So I remember kind of around the Expo regional time that I think Alex White and Zenesis were playing it in their deck to get the museums online and just get everything kind of churning through.
But that's also because you had that busted Heritage Committee interaction at the same time that was then erupted, right? Sure. Yeah. But I think it's also worth pointing out that part of the reason why you didn't see a lot of tubs recently, or you haven't seen a lot of tubs recently, is because all of the counters that are good against hot tubs, Soulset Slums, Archives Interface, Employee Strike, are all being played because everyone's playing Wizard, because they need to counter CTM as the objective best corp deck in the meta up until yesterday night. And I mean, I worry that with a meta that becomes a little bit more diverse, that what you actually end up seeing on the corp side of things is half the meta rushing across to go and play exciting old Glacier, Caprice, Food Coats, RP, Polana, and the other half of the meta rushing off in the opposite direction to just play oppressive asset spam because there are fewer wizards around, and that makes that archetype a lot better. And I think Gargarin, in particular, benefits a lot from a drop-off in Employee Strike, Slums, and Wizard. And I think in that deck in particular, the Mumbad City Hall interaction can be really, really oppressive.
Can we call Gargarin by its proper name, please? Fake Wayland.
Fake Wayland, sure.
Yeah.
Just as Guys is fake criminal, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Mini faction criminal. I was under the impression that that's what Geist was.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. Putting MCH on the most wanted list right now as a preemptive measure, even though it's not that common in the last few months, who knows, people might rush to it, as you rightfully point out. That's a very astute observation.
Yeah, I agree. It probably works best as a preventative measure, but my feeling was that it wasn't as much in evidence as some of the other cards that have been targeted, like Temujin, like Sensie's Actors Union. So to me, it just never seemed like that much of a problem. But I can see.
I think it also becomes a lot more powerful when you take away things like Parasite and stuff, like which naturally fall off when people aren't playing Anarch, because it pretty much relies on Tour Guide as its being pain in the arse piece of ice, right? Which means all shapers should be packing Shrike, but other than that,
or indeed should be packing Switchblade if they're going smoke and stealth.
Yeah.
Top tech tips there. Hope you are keeping your eyes open. Ears open, listeners. All right. So that's City Hall done with. One final card. We'll talk about these two cards in tandem. Desperado off, Temujin on the most wanted list. So this change in effect leaves Criminal at status quo. Nothing has changed. The extra influence is basically spent on Temujin instead of Desperado. What do y'all think of this change as a whole?
I think this shows that Boggs has got a really good idea of where the runner meta is right now, which is that Anarch cards are being targeted, criminals are being shaken up, but in effect kept the same in terms of their power level, and shapers are slightly being buffed in that one of the key cards that has worked traditionally with Shaper, Prepaid Voice Pad, is coming off the list. So I like it. I think it shows that it's going in the right way.
I also think it's nice that you've got the FFG team recognizing that the addition of Desperado to the most wanted list actually didn't change the way in which criminal deck building happened. People still just swallowed the influence hit and slotted 3 Desperado. And I think, part of the reason why is because the criminal options for consoles are interesting, but not necessarily consistently good, and certainly not as consistently good as Desperado. So it's nice to see FFG recognizing that addition didn't make any difference to criminal deck building, and to sort of double punish them by having both on the most wanted list would just lead to criminal not being played. So I'm really happy to see Temujin on, so that it takes it away from other factions and corrects the problem that many people have said that Temujin contract has, and also ensuring that criminals don't get that same influence hit from being double punished with Desperado and Temujin on the most wanted list.
I think that's quite an interesting observation. So one of the key objectives of the most wanted list in the past was to diversify options. Back then, Desperado was off the most wanted list and everyone only played Desperado. So they said, well, let's make it one influence. Now you should think carefully of whether you want to play Desperado or whether you should play something like a Logos or Doppelganger. Spoiler alert, no one did. So, so why not just take Desperado back off? The problem with Desperado is not so much Desperado being too good, is that the other consoles are just too crap. So, I guess hopefully in the future, better criminal consoles will be designed, because it's not Desperado's problem. Desperado is a really good console for the game, encouraging the runner to play proactively and run often, which is always good. Mark, what do you think of Temujin contract, on the other hand, which was put on the most wanted list? It also encourages a lot of runs, but I guess it's not that healthy for the game.
So I think this shows a marked difference between Boggs and Damon in the way that they've kind of looked at approaching it. So I don't think that Criminal, when the most wanted list came out with Desperado on it, was particularly a problem faction, unless you play in my very specific meta and you get slapped by Criminal all the time. But he kind of gave his reasons to saying, like we've already said, like the reason it's going on is because it limits design space and that runners won't look at any other console other than Desperado. I think, as you've already said, like we're not afraid of considering other consoles. It's just we like to play good cards, and if you give us crap criminal consoles, of course we're going to play the best one. Like Grimoire was played quite a lot in Anarch, but now we kind of moved away to Turntable for a short time, and then we've moved away to Cifr, and now people are considering more. And I don't think that limits the design space. And I think it's kind of shown an understanding from Boggs that he's not just going to do that. He's actually looking at the game from a competitive and a player experience, which is really comforting. Yeah, I agree that Temujin should definitely be on there. I actually think it should have been 3 influence in the first place. The fact that it became a standard economy choice for Anarch and Shaper as a criminal card is baffling. And the numbers on that card are insane. I think that its potentness goes away somewhat with the rise of Glacier again, because it's going to be a lot more difficult to make efficient runs, whereas we're looking in this asset spam meta and yellow heavy meta where there's not a lot of ice and any ice is quite cheap. Of course, you're going to make a lot of money off there. I think that if you do play 3 Temujin now, you get that nice early boost, but you're not really going to be looking at making a lot of money off them in the kind of mid to late game when you're playing against HB, Glacier, and Polana or RP. Which is fine and is a good place to be in, I think. But I still think that regardless of that fact, it still needs to be an influence, because the fact that it became an automatic 2 or 3 of in other factions is a problem. And I think that it was a card that Criminal needed in terms of their economy and other stuff. And I think it's a powerful card, but it shouldn't be a ubiquitous card that everyone plays.
And I think the fact that it was included as a 3-of in a lot of Shaper decks is also indicative of the fact that a lot of the Shaper economy options, since Prepaid Voice Pad went onto the most wanted list, are not really that palatable or are just too slow to be effective. So things like Magnum Opus, for instance, just meant that Kate, couldn't money up nearly as quickly as she used to be, able to when you were playing Prepaid Voice Pad and Lucky Find. And I think that is a large part of the reason why Shaper has suffered a lot recently, is because you've got a high overhead in installing Magnum Opus. It's really click intensive in order to gain a lot of credits, and it means that you can't contest assets in a really fast meta. And I think this is also going back to my excitement in Prepaid Voice Pad coming off the most wanted list. I think it's nice to see that whilst Temujin contract has been taken away from Shapers, and so a large source of the economy that was keeping the few people that were playing Shaper afloat has disappeared. It's nice to see FFG recognize that Shaper needs better options, and to give them one of the best options that they used to have back to them is really exciting.
When we say Shaper, though, we mean Kate, right? Because no other Shapers were playing Prepaid Voice Pad, but I mean that's always going to be the case.
But I mean that's part of the problem then was that you were relying on really slow economy engines that were install intensive, Panopticon Haley, for instance. But even the Smoke deck that I was playing for a while a couple of months back was also entirely reliant on the Temujin contract, and probably could have been meaningfully improved with Prepaid Voice Pad.
I don't know. I think Smoke is very run-based, and this Temujin on the most wanted list is actually a nerf to Smoke. Because
maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think you can quite easily find influence to slot in Desperado as console option if you're going for a run-based Smoke. And I think in a single influence pep, that's actually quite a nice option to have.
That's a very fair point. That's something that people should look to experiment with. Now, we are talking about Prepaid Voice Pad, so we might as well go into it. Is there a problem with bringing Voice Pad off the most wanted list? Now, one of the original intentions is that it opens up the design space for high-cost events. Do we think that this... why the sudden 180 on this? Does Prepaid Voice Pad really constrain the design on high-cost events? Or
I think Prepaid Voice Pad just constrained the ability for players to see Dan Dargenio's sleeved arms. Because everybody knows that's the best part about playing Prepaid Voice Pad is being able to play Juices Wild for nothing. So I think they just wanted to make sure that more players could have that happen.
I think it's also important. I mean, we talk about it limiting the design space. Prepaid Voice Pad is also one of those cards that rotates in about 4 months' time. So, I mean, how much design space are you really limiting with 4 months worth of...
Isn't Prepaid
cards to
Voice
come out?
Pad... What pack did that come out
I'm
in?
pretty sure
It
that
is
in the
Genesis,
spin
so
cycle.
yes, it will
Is it
rotate.
Genesis? Oh, good lord.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Spin cycle. I'm reading the symbol wrongly. Spin cycle.
Spin cycle,
Yeah.
okay.
So it will go. So
Yeah.
this is actually probably the decision that concerns me the most, because one of the reasons the Most Wanted list kind of came out was because Prepaid Kate was played by absolutely everyone. And it was a weird deck insofar as that I played it a lot. It didn't really have any bad matchups, and it had a couple of flex slots that you could kind of dictate for the meta, but it did become something that was being played everywhere. And it's got a good Glacier matchup. It's got a good yellow matchup. It's got a good thing. The only thing that kind of went away was it wouldn't be viable now because of the asset spam stuff. But obviously that, as we've discussed, has been significantly nerfed now, and it is only going to be around for 4 months. And I kind of feel like it might actually just be a pity nod to Shaper, just because they've been so untenable for so long, and they've not really been given any good economy cards. And like that, I get that that's always been like a weakness of Shaper. They've got Magnum Opus, but beyond that, they've not really got any good in-faction economy cards. And Prepaid Voice Pad was the economy that was the answer to that. But kind of taking that away and now just giving them back, I know that there are a number of players, including Tagorben, that's very excited about this and are probably, as we speak, frantically building prepaid Kate decks. And I kind of wonder if it makes that deck the best deck again, and people will just play it and everyone will play it.
Yeah,
I think this speaks to the one of the issues that we've been kind of hinting at when it comes to talking about the Most Wanted list is, what is the Most Wanted list aiming at? Is it diversity or is it a good player experience? Because I feel like this Most Wanted list, above all the others we've seen, is aiming at a good player experience, and diversity not so much the issue. Keeping down things that people weren't enjoying, like prison, like other forms of asset spam, but giving more tools back, like giving Desperado back, giving Prepaid Voice Pad back. Not many people thought that Prepaid Voice Pad was a bad deck to play against. People probably didn't like the fact that it was everywhere, but it wasn't like you had a bad time playing against it. So I think maybe this Most Wanted list is actually trying to improve the player experience at competitive events.
I think, yeah, that's a very important point for viewers to note, because there will always be a stronger strategy, and oftentimes the competitive players will always converge on it. That being said, the Most Wanted list is in no ways, I really don't think it's stifling diversity, because if you want diversity, you can always play with without the Most Wanted list, as it is, pretty much only there for the tournament scene. You can just bring your Cifr decks, your rumor mill decks, and have all the fun you want on the kitchen counter. But for the sake of the competitive player base, which has been really suffering in the previous few months due to the stagnant meta and the negative player experiences abound with the most competitive decks. These changes, as Sam mentioned, sacrificing diversity at the cost of, sacrificing diversity to get a more positive player experience, I think is better for the competitive scene and the game overall. So with that in mind, we move on finally to Eli 1.0, the final card that has been removed from the Most Wanted list, and as Mr. Box put it, the card that was the first in line to be struck off. So a lot of people make the argument with Paperclip that existing now, Eli is arguably less good. Personally, I'm gonna go against the crowd here and say that if I were to make a Most Wanted list, I would leave Eli on. The thing is, it's still a really good barrier, and I don't see the problem of forcing HB to pay one extra influence for it. It is only one influence after all, and HB is one of those factions that can easily spare the influence.
I think it's also worth noting that a large part of the reason why Eli was put on the first most wanted list was because it was just ubiquitous. I mean, it was in RP, it was in NEH.
That was
because
what I was going to say.
cost a
Yes.
single influence pip. I mean,
Yeah. I
Why would you not
definitely-
play it in NEH or whatever?
Yeah.
Dave Paterson, who used to run, or still does, I think, netrunners.co.uk, made a very convincing case that it was the worst card in Netrunner. Like it was the card that was stifling corp ice choices, which then impacted runner icebreaker choices, and it just kind of spread down the line, such that a lot of the meta was being warped by this one unassuming 3-cost piece of ice.
For sure. When around Order and Chaos, someone asked me, what do you think is the most powerful piece of ice out there? And a lot of people assume I would say Tollbooth, but I said Eli, and there's a very good reason for that. As you said, it just completely warps the runner meta. You can't play anything but Corroder, or when Lady came out, Lady. And the problem is, this is another case of that diversity versus player experience thing, right? I think Eli will stifle diversity in the sense that, I mean, in the past few months, we've seen nothing but vanillas from the corp side in terms of barriers. And after this most wanted list, I think we'll see nothing but Eli's. I don't think, for most corps, it is rather trivial to fork out a couple of influence for this lovely piece of ice. And most people will. And as a result, a lot of runners will have to think carefully about what their fractal strategy is going to be. I don't think it returns much in the form of a positive player experience, unlike, say, with Prepaid Voice Pad, which, might make for some interesting economy engines. This Eli being more ubiquitous, I don't know. Do y'all think it's healthy for the game?
I think a worthwhile comparison to ask, particularly if we're doing the sort of Eli's coming off maybe to give HB a little bit of a boost, not like it needs it, but let's assume that that's the reason. Why then is Architect still on the most wanted list? I mean, Architect is a really, really good card. It's one of the World Champ cards and one of the stated goals of the World Championship cards. At least, I now question this, having watched the long argument ensue on Netrunner Dorks. But the idea behind that was you got the world champion, gave them the opportunity to design this really powerful card that would be really exciting. And apparently Jeremy Swern really pushed very, very hard to get Michael Boggs to consider taking Architect off the most wanted list instead of Eli. I think part of the problem with Eli is just that it is a single influence pip. At 2 influence or a single influence to HB, you could have solved the problem of giving HB more influence back by taking Architect off the list. And I think Architect is still slightly more difficult to splash.
I strongly disagree. I do not think Architect should be a card that can be splashed. I might be more inclined to agree with you if Architect were 4 influence. As it stands, however, I don't think it's fair that other factions can splash for an Architect and make face checking that much harder. That's
the worst bit about it is that it can't be trashed, right? It's the only piece of advice in the game that is always going to stay there unless you emergency shut down it. Like, that's a really, really powerful and unique effect as far as I'm aware.
And it's the fact that it is so punishing when you hit it. Like we talk about, how strong Sensie is if you let it fire. A single Architect fire can often decide a game. Because if you've just gone and trashed something like an Adonis campaign, but then you face plant into an Architect, you give the corp 5 free pieces of information, a card back that you've just trashed. It's so punishing. And again, the runner meta was often decided by, do you have an answer to Architect before you start checking ice? Because if you don't, tough luck, you've probably just set yourself back a bunch of turns.
Sure, but I mean, then is the argument not the same with a piece of ice like Eli? Not from a face check perspective, but in terms of, we don't like this ice appearing in all decks in the meta because it's too easy to splash, because it's too powerful. I think Ben makes the right comment that it basically strongly limits the choice of fractor that most runners are going to have available to them. I mean, realistically, you can no longer get away with something like Inti as your barrier breaker and shaper because you don't have the option of a 1 influence Cifr to get through Eli easily. And if Eli is in every deck, in RP, for instance, which can just throw out enhanced login protocol and tax out your clicks to make it that much more irritating to break through. I mean, look, I love Eli. It took me ages and ages and ages because we didn't have future proof in South Africa. So it took me until the World Champ decks were released to get Eli into my HB deck, and I love that full bleed. But I think it is a really, really strong barrier and probably shouldn't have come off the list.
I think it's the kind of question of parity, though, when you look at it from usually when I evaluate pieces of ice, I look, right, well, how much is this costing me to res? How much is the most efficient breaker costing the runner to break this piece of ice? And 4 with Corroder for a 3 res is a ridiculously good effect. And the fact that it was 1 influence, so you could splash it everywhere, was a significant problem. If you look at it now and it being exactly on parity for Paperclip for doing that, it's just a...
Well, it is, right?
I don't know.
Because
it kind of brings it back a little bit, right?
You need to actually break Eli twice in order for it to be on parity with Paperclip, because you've also got the upfront 2+ install cost. So you spending 2 extra credits. If you're going through Eli multiple times, then yes, Paperclip is going to be more efficient in the long run. But it's still a really taxing piece of ice to get your Paperclip out and break the first time.
Is Eli in Luna or Spin?
No, future proof. It's the very first cycle.
Yes, very first cycle. Yep.
Okay, so it's
does
not going to be a problem in a very long time. I would say that I agree. I think that it will end up being everywhere and then it will just disappear again, obviously. But I think that if that wasn't the case, that it might end up coming back on if HB does get the bump that we're kind of expecting it to get. But again, I think it might be one of these kind of pity things. Corp do need something right now because Runner was so powerful yesterday.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's going to have a limited impact if in the sense that it's only going to impact the next 4 months. So I guess it's slightly forgivable, even if removing it from the list turns out to be a mistake.
So I think Mark just made a really interesting point about runners being dominant in the latest meta. One of the things that did strike me about this most wanted list is that it has done a lot to make the runner factions more equally powerful. So we've pulled up Shaper a little bit, we've pulled Anarch down a little bit, we haven't really harmed Criminal. I'm not really sure this most wanted list has done anything to resolve one of the bigger problems in the Corp meta, which is that Corps are just generally quite weak. I mean, the bringing back defensive upgrades is certainly a good start, but it does still feel like runners are in a very dominant position in the meta at the moment. Runners seem to be getting the better share of good cards in the packs that we've seen recently. So I wonder to what extent the Corp meta is going to be improved by the most wanted list outside of the removal of certain NPE cards like Blackmail, like Rumor Mill.
I think it's something that's going to remain to be seen. Like I think it's hard to see the exact effect that, say, an entire archetype like Glacier, which has been, for the past year or so, been basically forgotten. When that comes back, I do wonder, if it's going to make the runner have to make more difficult choices about, which silver bullets they put in their deck, which cards they put in their deck, in order to, counter what Glacier is doing. I wonder if that's going to maybe just introduce more parity simply through the more diversity that there's going to be in the Corp meta. I don't know.
I think that's likely to happen, Sam. I do.
Having not had, decided on 4 decks that are already good, I can't say. But if you've done that, I defer to your assessment.
Yeah, I feel like the diversity might potentially be an illusion, because everyone's still searching for the best strategy. The meta's likely to not stagnate for at least the next 1 or 2 months. But it's hard to say after that. Who knows?
We've also got the release of something big and exciting on the horizon to add an extra kick to the meta if it didn't have it already.
I mean Scorpios.
Yes, indeed, I mean Scorpios.
Because that's what we're really excited about, right?
Make Wayland great again.
No, don't do this.
Fine, Ben. It just means you can't take DLR Max to Worlds and win with another degenerate deck.
Scorpios on tier 3 now.
I agree.
It won't last long, I'm sure.
We'll see. We can do a terminal directive review on that. But yeah, that covers all the deltas, all the changes in the most wanted list. Looking at the 11 cards that were not that did not change from the past most wanted list. We have breaking news, Sensie the Grid, Architect that we talked about a bit, Mumbad Temple, NAPD contract, Clone Chip, Lady, Wildside, Parasite, David, and York. Do any of these no changes surprise any of you? Do you all think some of them should be taken off the list or bumped up?
Maybe Yogg could come off. I like Yogg.
You are kidding me.
I like Yogg. I think it's a cool breaker. I
Go
like
home.
the idea.
Lady is the only one that I.
Lady. It's got to be Lady, right?
Yeah, no,
So the reason why I think it's been left on is that whole colour pie reason that yellow always has to be good, Wayland always has to be bad, and Shapers aren't apparently allowed a good barrier breaker.
They're green as well, so they get hit along with Wayland.
Yeah, yeah, they get the flack from Wayland. And also, when you look at the reason I say this is not just because Shaper's my favorite runner faction. I say this because I think Lady's powers significantly decreased recently. Like, there's a lot more multi plus 2 subroutine barriers now, where you're looking at kind of using those counters, probably 2 on a singular piece of ice for some stuff. I think its powerful effect goes away. The main reason why it was put in the first place was because of the card we were just talking about, Eli, right? It was the most efficient way to break it for a credit and a counter you could break Eli for. But taking that away and leaving that there, like, I don't understand why they've taken Prepaid Voice Pad off, but they've left Lady on. That just kind of seems like an odd decision. The only reason I can possibly think of is that colour pie reason.
I don't think they wanted to, take all the prepaid cake cards off the most wanted list and see it suddenly researched because it just gained a lot of influence. Regarding your analysis of the recent barriers, I kind of agree. They tend to be multi-sub, but if you look at the recent barriers, the thing with them is that it's not so much that Lady doesn't deal with them well, it's that there are just better ways to deal with them. For IP block, for example, your best bet around it is to beat the trace. For what other new barriers are there? Data Ward, your best bet is to play Hunting Grounds instead, and avoid the on-encounter effect. And yeah, if you're looking at Chiashi, I don't think you really want to break that repeatedly with Lady anyway. So,
or indeed something like Tithonium.
Tithonium would be interesting. Yeah.
Because my big concern is just that Shaper doesn't really have a good Fractor in faction aside from Lady. I mean, most of the decks that I'm seeing are splashing for Paperclip, or indeed were running Inti because they could get away with just ciphering any big barriers that they came across.
It's fine. They can just play Security Nexus. I guess. What I'm trying to get across is that the problem with Lady is that being at 3 strength and breaking subroutines for essentially free, it just blanks design space in the same way as York does. It really warps the barrier choices for corps, and we did see that in the past. And I'm happy for it to stay on the most wanted list because of that. Alright, so with that covered, we'll move on to the final topic, which is cards that are not on the most wanted list, but should have been. I have 2 of them on my list, but we feel free to talk about more.
I feel like we're all gonna have.
I think we've all got the same 2 cards on the list.
Friends? Anyone?
Yes,
Friends?
Yes,
okay,
friends.
let's start with friends.
No, I was just saying you guys are my friends, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
No, you're not. And tell us why friends in high places aren't exactly our friends, Sam.
It's one influence. Like that's the big thing, right? Is that any faction can run it, and I was putting it in my Blue Sun deck. It's ridiculous. Like, ice trashing is a problem. Put in friends. Are you running asset spam? Put in friends. Are you running defensive upgrades? Put in friends. The fact that it works with everything, and the fact that it's one influence,
and not removed from the game either. That you can cycle it with Jackson. Oh,
exactly. Yeah. Or archive memories. Play friends. And get 2 cards back. It's
clone suffrage movement. Play friends.
Yeah. Too cheap. Too useful in too many situations, and it impacts. It improves too many oppressive corp strategies in the form of prison decks. All those reasons mean it should have gone on.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Sam said there. I think that it was a problem for asset spam. I think it's still going to remain a problem for Glacier, because now when you win a side game with the Caprice, or you trash that Ash, or you're trashing corp economy, and you're thinking, right, well, they have to. The best case scenario is that they basically have to get a Jackson, cycle that back in, and then draw it and put it back in there before I have to deal with it again. Now they literally just play it as 2 clicks, and that problem is there all over again that you've got to deal with. And I think that that's a massive impact across all of the boards.
Yeah, this strikes me as the limitation of that weird 6-month rule. And Michael did make the point of saying on the winning agenda that he was really reluctant to break the sort of like unofficial rule that Damon started, but it definitely feels like in this instance that this is a bad decision. This card absolutely should have been on the MWL, no question.
Yeah, I've been saying a lot on Slack that everyone is going to not like the meta when everyone ends up playing Glacier strategies with Friends Recursion on Caprice and Ash, because that's exactly how Friends can be abused, and it's not Caprice's fault. Caprice is designed such that, if you win the side game, you get through the server. Caprice is trivial to trash. It has a 1 trash cost, and it's quite hard to get back unless you draw another one. Friends just nullifies that, right? You can recur it easily with Friends, and there's very little way in which the runner can disrupt Friends. So I'm definitely not happy about this either, but given how
if you also look at the runner answers to what we're now presented with regards to Caprice and Ash, so you've got things like pull-up, which is a single-use, councilman, which is kind of limiting the time when it can be read, and the same with interdiction. The fact that you're able to use that to an effect to essentially gain an advantage for like 1 turn or half a turn to trash that, and then that can just be flat negated by a card that is, I imagine, will be universal, is going to be a massive impact. It basically means that you've got to spend all your recursion as a runner to go and get your pull-up again, or to be using councilman or whatever that thing is on a consistent basis, and it just becomes a war of attrition, and I think that that's gone towards a corp favour because of this, and the fact that it's 1 influence is really, really bad.
This to me seems like it should have been the first of the tier 2 cards.
Yeah, I think tier 2 is perfect for Friends.
I agree.
I agree as well. The thing about rendering pull-up useless, that is a point I tried to bring up on Slack as well, but a very good counter-argument to that is that if you're pull-upping a Caprice and getting into the server because of that, chances are you're stealing an agenda off the back of it. So even though the Caprice will eventually stick on the table due to Friends, you still come out 2 agenda points ahead. So it's not that bad. What's more
not necessarily against HB though. that could just be an asset.
Yeah, that's true.
The best of ruses.
But, well, at least guessing the never advanced game is sort of fun. What isn't fun is that Friends enables the attrition game, as Mark rightfully pointed out, with asset spam, and that's a lot worse. Alright, so yeah, I think we're in universal agreement with Friends there. It should be 2 on the tier 2 most wanted list. Now, what about our other friend, Aaron Moran?
I don't like Aaron Moran. I get why he was created, and I get that he solves a lot of problems that criminals historically have had with draw and with dealing with tags, but why is it...
Criminals didn't have a problem dealing with tags. They were the best at dealing with tags.
Yeah, no, it's literally just draw, but what I mean to say is dealing with the breaking news tags.
Yeah. Instant tag removal.
Yeah, instant tag removal. And I mean, what I don't understand, why did they allow Aaron to snowball? Why is this a card that allows for the power counters to be placed when you steal an agenda and when the corp scores an agenda? Why not just when the corp scores?
So basically,
I think that would
it's
make
too
completely
efficient
fine.
at what it does.
Yeah, way too efficient, and it's so cheap. And sure, MCA Informant has created a lot of interesting counterplay, all of that, yada yada yada. Aaron is just way too good at what he does. I mean, the fact that I played a game where I've used MCA Informant to get rid of Aaron, the runner then used Aaron to draw into another Aaron to install over Aaron. It was just ridiculous. I mean, there needed to either be some errata that the draw could only be used when tags are removed, or to limit the power counters that he gains when the agenda is scored, either because it's the corp score or 1 counter each way. I think in its current form, it's just far too powerful. And that was one of the reasons why you saw it splashed in all of the different factions, even at 2 influence.
Yeah, I think,
So
yeah.
I agree that Aaron is an incredibly powerful card, and I do think that there needs to be some form of errata on it. I still find it baffling that you can use him to draw whenever you like, even when you don't have a tag. I think there should be an either or option as a minimum, or that you can only use him when you're tagged. Giving criminals clickless draw is an issue from that, but I don't think that he should be on the most wanted list. And the reason that I think that is because I think yellow gets a massive boost on it, and I think that's the reason why it's been there. I think that MCA presents a way to get around him and play around him in yellow, but he's an incredibly costly way to do that, which I think kind of balances it somewhat. I think it needs to be evaluated more, but I think yellow gets a lot of power if that it's lost in this most wanted list, which is kind of what we're trying to get away from, essentially, is a nothing but yellow and Anarch meta. I think it needs to be reviewed, and I think it says a lot that we both had friends in Aaron that's on there, and I think that he's a fringe case, and he is a candidate for review and potentially being one in the future, but I don't think that he's a case for one right now.
Yeah, I'm not so sold on Aaron going straight onto the most wanted list. I get they're reluctant to errata cards in a way that manifestly changes how they work. Errata tends to be more for like clarification. But if they're going to do it to power shutdown, don't see why they can't do it to Aaron as well and say that it's, remove a tag to draw a card.
Even then, I don't know, because
it's that synergy with count Cipher that's the biggest problem for me.
That is the deal breaker for me.
But if you think about it, it's worth, if you install it before any agendas are scored, it's worth maybe 10 cards across the game. And that's only if you can account siphon that many times.
You also have to look at this in a really narrow view, because you're saying account siphon's a problem. But account siphon isn't as viable a strategy in a world where Glacier and defensive upgrades are a thing, right?
Yeah.
So that, like, to be able to go in and spend, and just in games that I may have played in the past few weeks against a notable siphoner, is that when you're playing and you're spending those 14 credits to get in and take my money or whatever, and you're clearing the tags, it's still a very costly effect of doing it, and eventually it will wear down. And if they're not using those to clear tags and draw cards, then it still presents an interesting decision mechanic. And I think that with the more ice and the fact that it gets more and more costly and that siphoning becomes less and less good, I think that sort of balances itself out anyway. And that is why, with that experience, it's that I don't think, if you look at it in that siphoning, I agree, in the yellow meta is a problem when you're able to get rid of it with Aaron so quickly. But having that Glacier thing, the fact that it becomes so costly to do it, it isn't as powerful. But also MCA kind of brings it into balance. I think that it needs to be let to settle for a few months before we actually put it on the most wanted list.
That's quite interesting. I do agree with you that Glacier naturally negates Siphon because it's very taxing to get through HQ. What I'm not happy about Aaron doing is that it changes the Siphon maths, right? So usually when you Siphon, you have to spend one whole turn pretty much clearing the tags and losing some tempo. So it gets to a point quite quickly for the corp where a double ice HQ makes Siphon unviable.
You're aware of that as a corp player as well, though, right? It's not as if that Aaron is going to sneak up on you and you're notably scoring an agenda or they're stealing one. Like, you're aware that they have those counters and that siphon mass does change. Like, that's not an unfair interaction. You're aware that is actually a thing that's going to happen or potentially could happen.
It's true. Yeah, but it just makes siphon so high impact that
So maybe, I mean, now, like, having listened to Mark, I'm starting to think about this in the same way that you think about trying to rush against Leela. You alter your game plan against Leela in order to prevent her from being able to bounce your HQ ice and immediately siphon you and potentially float tags or drop them, sort of in the last 2 clicks. I mean, that was a strategy that criminals could employ and did employ to great effect. And maybe I think Aaron is a less good version of this ability, where it means that you can spend a turn setting up for a siphon, mitigate the tags with Aaron, but you can only really do that when you've either stolen or the corp has scored an agenda. I think it's much more problematic when it follows you having stolen an agenda, because it means that not only has the corp lost points, they then have the double whammy of then having to respond to also being siphoned. And I think that interaction is a little bit problematic, which is, goes back to my problem with Aaron in the first place. But I think you're right, Mark. I think this is a less oppressive interaction because it is one that you can plan for and play around. So maybe this is a wait and see. Certainly, this is a less clear-cut case than Friends.
I think we can all agree, though, that the free draw is an issue because it not only impacts criminal and other factions' ability to deal with tags in a way that turns them into a positive, but it also makes things like net damage decks far less powerful.
Yeah.
So it just expands too wide.
Or indeed makes Argus unplayable virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't even get me started.
Yeah, that's the other point, right? Argus and Jinteki PE basically become very difficult to play. Granted, PE has voter intimidation faction, so it's not that bad.
Also blank C source, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So yeah, very interesting discussion there. There definitely can be a case for keeping Aaron off the most wanted list. Personally, I would have put him on, but you make some very good points, Mark. Definitely.
Thanks, Ben.
Especially about keeping NBN in check. I think that's a very important one because NBN is still a pretty strong faction even without Sensie.
NEH is going to be strong for time immemorial. So.
For sure. So yeah, let's wrap this up. Closing thoughts on the overall effect of this MWL and maybe what you think are archetypes that people should be exploring. Let's start with you, Sam.
Well, I'm just glad that Boggs decided to forgo his attempt to build his own version of Netrunner and came to actual Netrunner because this is a really positive start.
What about you, Tris?
I mean, I started off by saying that the new most wanted list was really exciting. That was my word to describe it. And I think part of the reason I'm super excited is because it takes me back to the Netrunner that I started playing. The Big Ice HB, Prepaid Kate, the fact that you've got lots of different viable options across the factions. This is an exciting time to be playing Netrunner, and I'm really excited to see where the meta goes. I expect to see big Glacier archetypes. I expect to see Polana, HB, ETF, and RP being the dominant decks for the next couple of weeks, with a resurgence as well in asset spam type decks. That's what I would be expecting on the Corp side. From the runner side, I'm really excited to see all the different Polar, Councilman, interdiction tools for dealing with those upgrades and for playing around them and playing with them. I think it's going to be really, really cool.
All right, nice one. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I kind of made statements before about enjoying last few weeks of playing games and testing around with the lists and stuff. And I don't know how much got cut off from that, but I've been playing games with Dave and testing what we thought would be the most wanted list and has turned out to be the correct one, in that like games are now decided with like good bits of play or skill or actually kind of making a correct decision at the right time rather than kind of just going through a drawn out kind of inevitable victory or inevitable loss depending on what matchup or what deck you're in playing. And that's a really, really good positive thing to be taken from it. And kind of just looking on JNet today, the fact that most people are now back to playing again kind of shows that it's increased the accessibility and the fun that people are going to have with the game in the next few weeks and months, hopefully.
Mark, 0, 1 or 2?
Always 1 if you're the runner.
Sorry, I picked 2.
You say that right now when I actually play against you.
This is the long con, basically.
Yeah, I'll never bid 1 in a side game again, and I basically got 50-50 chance now. or the correct answer there is no, you can't res it because I've played interdiction. Or no, I've got follow-up. Get out.
Or I played government
interdiction.
What's that? Government investigations. Yeah.
Yeah, government investigations. I played that in Adam. Don't knock it. It's a good card.
So yeah, as you all said, it will be very interesting to see a lot of new diverse strategies emerge now that the most overpowering of cards are gone. It'll take a couple of months for the meta to settle down, so I expect things will be in flux and therefore very exciting from now till then. Of course, we might eventually just settle on one or two best decks, and it might become boring again. But I think one of the big goals of Most Wanted List ultimately is to regularly shake up the meta in a world where the card pool is very saturated with good cards, the card pool is very big, and it's quite difficult to shake up the meta with new pack releases alone without printing bonkers cards like Cifr and Temujin. So yeah, I'm very happy with the Most Wanted List, and for you at home out there, as we've alluded to, you better get started with practicing those side games, man. Always bet one? Maybe. To close things off, I'd like to advertise the BBW that's happening at Aldershot this Saturday, 15th April. This will actually be Most Wanted List compliant. Even though it's on short notice.
Even though Triss voted against it.
I knew someone was going to fucking bring that up. I knew it.
You monster, Triss.
I wasn't going to until Ben mentioned it.
Yeah, the vote was like something like 53-1 or something in favor.
No. There are now two other people that have joined me. As it turns out, Alex White likes Dumblefork. Alex, you're the best.
When I saw that you had voted and then that Mark was also going to be on this show, I was like, what are you guys so worried about? Same old thing, an account siphon on the list. No, you just like 25 copies of those cards, right?
Yeah.
This is the only thing I was running in my deck. Just 44 copies of account siphon in my ID. It was fantastic.
And this is how Triss wins tournaments, everyone. But yeah, that aside, do take note of this rules change, even though it's on very short notice, so don't come in with your Dumbleforks or CTM or what have you. Alright, it's high time we wrapped up this video. This has gone on for a very long time, but I really appreciate all the insight and the dialogue that we've had. Thanks again. Thanks, Triss.
Cheers, Ben. Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, cheers, Ben. Thanks very much for having me.
And thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Ben. Always bit zero. Always bit zero.
You heard that from the man. Alright, thanks everyone for tuning in, and happy net running. Goodbye.